Hold on, I need to turn this other thing off making noise. And we're live, which just leaves me to say welcome to another fun filled edition of Adam's Music Box, the Saturday streaming edition. And today I want to talk about an issue that's very close to my heart, and I think that it's very close to the hearts of a lot of people out there, musicians, music lovers, and people who just like to have fun. And people who like to have fun are unfortunately an endangered species, and I want to try to conserve them. Now, don't I and don't you? Now, live music is dying, and there are many causes of death written on that death certificate. And I think this is really bad because live music is where music began, quite literally. Before we had Spotify, before we had the long playing record, the 78 record, the cylinder, the player piano, self playing organ, before any of that, we had live music. And it was the only place to hear music for, 9/10 out of humankind's history. If you wanted to hear a piece of music, you'd have to go to where a musician was playing, or you would have to play it or sing it yourself. And of course, this all changed in the 19th century with the advent, of course, of self playing instruments like the player piano, like recorded sound, later on, like radio. And now we can hear music almost anywhere we want. We can have it in our pocket. In fact, with a streaming service, you can have just about every piece of music ever recorded in your pocket. And with YouTube, you can have almost every piece of video or filmed, documented live music in your pocket as well. And that's a good thing. It has helped democratize music. As I said in a previous stream about some of my favorite local musicians around the world, it gives an opportunity for local musicians to become regional, national, and internationally known, even if it's among what Spinal Tap might call a select audience. But none of this should be at the sacrifice or at the peril of the live music experience, which, no matter how advanced our recording and music distribution technology gets, there is still not ever going to be a substitute for sharing a physical space with a musician doing what musicians do. Now, the causes, like I said, of the decline of live music are manifold, and I just want to go through as many as I can think of in the time that we've got together today. And I'm going to start with one that makes the normies least comfortable, but the one that I think is probably the most important. Where does live music typically take place? Well, it can take place anywhere. You can create live music by yourself. All you need is an instrument or a voice and your human body, and there you go. You can go over to a friend's house and hear them play music. But generally, the majority of live music venues have been concentrated traditionally in urban areas. And all of our cities are dying, whether it's in America, Canada, everywhere in Europe, Australia. Things might be a bit better in places like Japan or China or Korea, but certainly in sort of North America and Europe, our cities are all dying. And there are many reasons. And one of the foremost reasons is out of control crime. And we all know it. You don't need a weatherman to see which way the wind blows, and you don't need a statistician to see the way the crime goes. Crime is up. It's everywhere because of evil and devious politicians who have effectively legalized crime either de jure or through the de facto lack of enforcement against crime. And so people aren't going out as much because, surprise, surprise, they don't want to be shot, stabbed, raped, robbed, have fecal matter thrown at them, be spat upon, be intimidated, be screamed at. They don't want it. Who wants it? No one wants that except the politicians. And I'll tell you why in a moment, because that's actually related to the second reason that live music is dying a death. But we need to do something about crime. We need to arrest criminals. It's really simple. There's a criminal on the street, remove them from the street and put them in the jail. It is so simple, but politicians don't want to do it. And this is the reason why. By making urban areas unlivable, it forces mass sell offs of property, because when you don't have safe cities, people don't go to the clubs and the bars and the restaurants and the record stores and the clothing stores and the hardware stores and all the rest of it. And so you have vacant buildings. vacant buildings then for cities. Well, it's not really they're doing it themselves. It gives the people who run these cities a plausible excuse to sell off large pieces, large plots of land to so-called developers. I would call them arch vandalists, who will then, throw money at the politicians, either in the form of donations, under the table bribes, or when they resign from politics, fake jobs which compensate them for doing the favors to the so-called developers. And so down go the buildings that were tailor-made for your clothing shops and restaurants and live music clubs and dance clubs and all the rest of it. And in comes horrible monstrosities of so-called high density, so-called housing that nobody wants. And even if you did want it, which few do, no one can afford it. And then the same developers who destroyed urban areas then get subsidies from the same governments who gave them the permits to do their vandalism, their architectural vandalism in the first place. Which leads me to thing number two. The venues are disappearing because of the process that I just defined. And, the building development trade, it's one of the most corrupt professions in the world, because here's what they do. Here's just the full cycle. I gave you the sneak preview. Here's the full version. So these developers, with all of their money and all of their high-priced lawyers, go to a city council or a state or whatever sort of government jurisdiction they can go to, and they can say, look, your downtowns, your urban areas are dying, and I know how to fix it, but I'm going to need kickbacks, and I'm going to need subsidies, and I'm going to need you to relax and change all of the zoning regulations, and I'm going to build this monstrosity that everyone's going to love. So they tear something down and they dig a big hole, and then whoops, the company's bankrupt. And the company then does a runner. The people who are in the company are always okay, but the company disappears. And so you've got a big hole in the ground where once there was a music venue or a record store or a cafe or a bar or any other family or locally owned business that actually makes a urban area or an urban area worth living in. And so what happens then? Well, then another company comes along and says to the government, well, if you pay me to fill in the hole in the ground, then, the mosquitoes will go away. And we all want that. And this is actually a real thing that happened in the city of West Hollywood, California. It happened just very recently. And so then they fill in the hole, and then you've got just a flat piece of empty ground. And then another corrupt development company says, well, I'll build this monstrosity, and I can, bring you some corrupt so-called urban planner who says that this bullshit high-density housing is what we need. We don't need the little cafe. We don't need the little two-story buildings that are built to a human scale and reflect the traditions and history and character of a culture and of an area. Just plop some monstrosity that isn't even built to last down where the music club and record store and little grocery store used to be. So they build that, stays empty for years. The government has to subsidize them again, wait another 15 years. It comes down and the cycle repeats. And before you know it, you have no culture. You have no urban area that has any resemblance to the traditions and the history of your city, whether it's New York or Chicago or London or Paris or LA or New Orleans, etc. And this is a huge problem. And this is why these politicians actually want the crime. They want the feces throwers and the shooters and the stabbers and the rapists, because that will help expedite this cycle of making the current commercial property model so-called unviable, when frankly it would be viable again if you got rid of the crime. But they want this cycle, so they want to drive out the businesses, they want to drive out the local people, they want to tear down a two flat in Chicago, for instance, to build a monstrosity, because that's good for their corrupt, horrible people in the multinational development companies. And so the crime wave and the corporatization of property, taking it out of the hands of families, making it unleasable by locally owned businesses, this is all by design. And live music is one of the principal casualties of this, because Live music was always, from a business point of view, a way of getting people into seats, getting people to sit in a room and buy drinks or food all night long. That's generally how these small and medium-sized venues made ends meet. It wasn't like a huge venue that a promoter rents out and takes the risk. These small venues hire musicians, and medium-sized venues too, and the musicians are there and they're getting paid as an attraction. Because if you're, drinking alone, one bourbon, one scotch, one beer, it helps to have one band on stage. And as I said, because of crime and because of these asset managers with the connivance of local politicians and other non-local politicians buying up these properties, we're seeing live music dying. And this cycle exists in just about every North American and European city. It is widespread. And that's why all of these cities are losing their characters, because they had unique character before in terms of the architecture, the people, the music, the food, and now everything is the same. It wasn't paradise before, but they sure paved it and put up something even worse than a parking lot. So there you go. Now, reason number three: everything is banned, everything is illegal. These same politicians that have driven people out through crime, those people who want to brave the streets, well, nothing is legal anymore. You can't smoke, you can't drink, you can't do anything. You can't laugh, you can't tell a funny joke if you're a comedian in some of these places. And so we basically need these people to fuck off, and we need to make fun legal again. If you want to drink, have a drink. If you want to smoke, have a smoke. If you want a joint, have a joint for all I care. Have whatever you want. If you want to play a card game in the basement, play a card game in the basement. Unlike the criminals who are killing people and robbing people and raping people, the people having a card game and the guy smoking a spliff in a jazz bar, he's not hurting anyone. And so we've got everything out of whack. Violent and intimidating crime is legal, but what we used to just call fun and natural human behavior that we would use to relax from the other pressures of the modern world, that's all illegal. If you rolled that back, it would be more commercially and culturally advantageous to set up live music venues where people can have a good time, because ultimately music is about conveying emotional experiences. And 9 times out of 10, when you go and see music, you're not looking for a bad experience, you're looking for a pleasant experience. So make the world fun again. Fun has been illegal. Made illegal. Comedy has been illegal. And although, Elon Musk has said that comedy is legal again, it may be on X, but in the real world, particularly in many of these cities run by deviant and evil politicians, fun and comedy is still very much banned. And we absolutely need to change that. 1 second. So what else do we need to do? Well, we need to change the incentives. Right now, the incentives, as I said, are for this horrible model of destroying historic urban areas to build these sort of so-called high-density housing units that no one wants and are ugly and take away from the character of a city. And we need to instead use systems of regulation, taxation, and all that other crap, and actually incentivize new people to set up music venues. I mean, a lot of traditional retail is gone because of these reasons, but also because of e-commerce. Why should I go and buy a pair of cheap Chinese shoes at a local business when I can buy them for $1 less on Amazon? But that should be actually good for live entertainment, because there are certain things that you cannot replicate on Amazon, and the sounds, the sights, the smells of a hardworking musical band on the road cannot be replicated, even on programs as good as YouTube and Spotify. And so people in charge, well, we need new people in charge, but once the new people come in, we ought to pick people with brains who can reverse these incentives. Don't incentive the asset managers, don't incentivize the developers and the venture capitalists. Incentivize locally owned businesses who want to have music. And that's the other thing. When you build these high density residential monstrosities in traditionally commercial areas. Most of the time, they remain empty. And when they don't, they're filled with normies who do nothing but complain. They don't complain about the guy spitting on them and screaming at the bus stop. They don't complain about a young Ukrainian refugee being killed on a bus, for that matter. But they do complain about people playing music because they fundamentally hate the culture into which they were born. They fundamentally hate the traditional human instinct. They're essentially little tyrants who want to bring down civility and are willing to tolerate all sorts of criminal malfeasance as a result. But anytime they hear people having fun, oh, then it's too noisy. The psycho who should be institutionalized screaming naked at a bus stop, that's okay. But the hot jazz combo playing a bit of amplified fusion at the coffee shop, that's bad. We need to reverse that mentality by telling these people to go away. We don't care how rich you are. We don't care how normy you are. We don't care how boring you are. We don't care which intelligence agencies you go to parties with. We are telling you to shut up. If you don't like the sound of music, don't live near a musical playing establishment. Move out to the suburbs, which is what normal people did who wanted quiet evenings. And that was just the way of the world. You don't want to. What they're doing is they're, by trying to make cities revived by so-called gentrifying them, they're actually taking away all of the good things that there used to be about cities while exacerbating the bad. So crime is worse, expense is worse, but the good things, letting it all hang out in a peaceful way, listening to some music, having a drink, having a smoke, tapping your foot, meeting some people, all of that stuff they're getting rid of. So all of the boring bits of suburbia are infecting the cities, where all of the good bits are nowhere, like safety, are nowhere to be found. And meanwhile, the suburbs are getting less safe, and they're now trying to destroy those with high density buildings that nobody except the asset managers and venture capitalists want. Again, how does that affect music? I will tell you how. Because the single family home is not only the best place to start a family, but it's the best place to start a band. Joe's Garage, you know. Think about it, setting up next to the Dodge, the traditional model of a couple guys on guitar, keyboard player, bass player, drummer, next to the Dodge, Ford, Chevy, or what have you. That was where music began. When you're too young to go to the club, if the music teacher at school isn't really your speed, or even if he is, you take whatever musical knowledge you've had, whether it's from piano lessons or a school music program or self-teaching, and you form a band. But if you're living in a high density monstrosity, it's just not going to work out because the people are going to suck and there's not going to be any space, and you're going to have to carry stuff upstairs, which when you're a 15-year-old kid, you're probably not that excited to do when you've got Grand Theft Auto maybe coming out and all these other interesting forms of stimuli. And so the same asset managers who are venture capitalists and politicians who are sucking the life out of the cities are also sucking the life and the music and the safety out of the suburbs by trying to pave those over into sort of quasi-urban monstrosities, but without any of the cultural benefits of living in a city. So just to recap, the cities are getting worse because they're losing their culture while keeping their crime, and the suburbs are getting worse because crime is overflowing, density that brings crime is overflowing, and the idea of a safe community where young people can get together and play music next to the Ford is becoming a thing of the past. So there's that too. So let's just again do a quick recap. Number one, the corrupt politicians, developers, and the asset managers and venture capitalists, which either own the development firms directly or invest in them. Thing number two, or was it thing number one? Don't worry about the order. Crime. Crime is out of control, and it's preventing people from going to the locations where the few venues that are showcasing live music still exist. And there's a horrible smell coming through the window. Oh my. It smells like death. Not like fire, don't worry, but smells like, ew, disgusting. Anyway, whew. I've honestly never smelled anything so bad, and it's just coming through the open window. I have no idea what it is. See? Ew. Wow. Whew. I might have to cut this short. The smell is so bad. I don't know. There's a sewer line out there has burst or what? Anyway, ooh. Hold on, folks. I'm going to try my best to finish it and then try to just wrap my nose in a blanket. Wow. Just wow. And see, big cities used to smell too, but if they were cheap and they were safe. So that leads me to the next oh no, we were recapping. Okay, crime out of control. Venture capitalists, asset managers, corrupt politicians, corrupt developers ruining the physical spaces where we once had music. The reverse incentives that incentivize building things nobody wants, as opposed to in a modern e-commerce world, actually using that to revitalize culture and things that cannot be replicated on e-commerce in the live domain. So there's the incentives: legalize fun, legalize comedy, let people drink, smoke, gamble, even let them do what they want so long as they're not hurting anyone. That's the other thing. Keep suburbs what they are. That's where a lot of these musicians begin. They begin in the garage next to the car and all of the rest of that. Joe's Garage, same, timeless story that is now being taken away from us. So that's the recap so far, but I did have some other things I wanted to add to this list before that horrible, absolutely ghastly smell, like wow, came through the window. Just wow. So let me try to gather my thoughts, because there were other things. Right, okay, so here's another one. Encourage young people to become musicians and really, promote, propagandize the benefits of the live musical experience. Movies like The Blues Brothers, more recent movies like School of Rock, I'm sure you can name others. These actually encourage people to learn an instrument, to jam with your fellow young instrumentalists and vocalists, to then get better, study it a bit harder, practice and rehearse a bit harder. And before you know it, you'll be pretty good. You'll certainly be good enough to play before an audience of your peers. And then if you get better, you'll be ready to play in a professional environment before a general audience. But if the parents aren't encouraging the kids, and if the culture isn't encouraging the kids, where is that inspiration going to come from? We absolutely need to value the live musical experience more, not only when it comes to professionals having a place to get paid to play, but also when it comes to the formative stages of teaching people an instrument and letting them know that not only is it cool, but that it's fun, that it's rewarding for those around them, and that even if you're invited to a party that isn't fun, you can make it fun by providing the musical entertainment. And so there is that as well. Let's see what else is killing live music. The war on the car. And this is sort of related to what's happening in cities. People need a place to park. And when you're turning the inside into the outside and the outside into the inside, people just don't have a place to park. People need a place to park. Give them a place to park. You don't pave over paradise, but, put up a parking lot, right next to paradise to make it a more convenient paradise. So then there's that. What else is there? I think we covered the main ones. Trying to think of what else, because I do know there's another. And before the horrible sewage smell came in from the window, and I still don't know if a pipe has burst or what. That we were on a roll, but I think because the smell is atrocious, I'm gonna have to cut it short. But I actually think that we covered all of the all of the basics. We went through all of the issues that are truly making live music an extinct phenomenon. And this would be really bad for people, for culture, for commerce, for everything. Make live music great again. These are the steps that we need to do it, at least most of them. I'm sure there are others. So as always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.